I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Indeed, this is one psalm that is very common in our personal reflections if we had any interaction with a Christian community. Indeed, I will see the hand of the Lord in the land of the living. Be encouraged, my soul. Stand still. Trust in the Lord. Words of encouragement that David wrote, encouraging himself as he reflected on the goodness of God. Yet many times when we think of success as believers, we think of people who have never ever told us they had a downtime. But is that really the successful walk of faith? We see Abraham struggling to submit to God and waiting upon his time until he receives the promise. We see Job struggling to surrender his total person and faith in God as he goes through challenging times after having had an amazing testimony of success and living out the fullness of what many perceive is the true Christian life. Having wealth, health, and a big happy life, status and standing all around us. Yet even in the hardest of moments, is God not there? Even in the hardest of circumstances, can faith not stand? And what about our mental health, our personal, emotional circumstances? How do they relate to success? I would like to introduce you to an amazing woman, Susan Ann Williams. She is an encouragement, having gone through her own journey through the valley of the shadow of death and coming out the other side stronger, coming out full of faith. Her testimony shares about the principles that God taught her about mental health, stress management, personal quiet time, rest, and yes, indeed, taking time off from the busy schedule of the vision that God would have given you. Striking it is. I hope you'll enjoy her sharing. I certainly had a very profound time. Welcome to Stepping Stones to Excellence, the podcast where we explore life's events and experiences through a Christian worldview. I am your host, Gamu.
The place, put a wall at the back, put windows in, met so many amazing people. And I would often say, isn't this the biggest blessing to own this beautiful spot that people came to, found rest. I'd find people reading their Bible by the pond, watching the koi fish. Mm-hmm. And so this was going to be our life for the next 20 years or however long we were going to work. Mm-hmm. And then it was going to be passed on to our children. Yeah. And then things started to go wrong. That was business-wise. And also, remember, as much as I can have business problems, I've also got a personal life. Yes. Got an individual life. I've got my husband. I've got children. Mm-hmm. So, sadly, it isn't always that just one thing starts to become a pressure point. At that time, quite a lot of things became a pressure point. My husband, possibly the first thing was, my husband had a triple bypass. So when your spouse has a triple bypass, your job is to try and keep him away from as much stress as possible. Mm-hmm. Let him rest, let him regain his strength.
Yes, to be the support system.
Yes, exactly. So then you pick up more jobs, you the front. My daughter got a divorce, and her ex-husband was left in Joburg. That was very traumatic for a mum to see her children's marriage break up and what that means. There was a bad business deal, which I think sadly lots of people have, but it all came at the same time. We also had our security guard steal the truck that he was meant to be guarding at night and use it as a taxi, and he had an accident with 16 people on. What did that mean to us? So Gamu, to be honest, your focus goes off developing and now just trying to manage all that is presented before you and work your way through it. But obviously I tried to do it by myself, keep my husband out of the stress. And then something we don't always understand, we were subdividing and getting the commercial rights for Village Walk. That was part of the process when we bought it. But we started having police arriving and saying we didn't have the right licensing. And we said, but look, everything is with the lawyers. It's all in process. We've subdivided from the flats at the back. And the police would just shut us down. Then they would go away for a month. Then we would get counsel saying we hadn't got the right licenses. And again, you feeling the stress coming on. Then we had fraud squad involved. And so now you're trying to look after your husband. You're trying to make sure your daughter settles. You're dealing with these problems.
External problems as well.
That you don't know where they're coming from and how you can solve them. And I think the bottom line is when you look back, you can feel this stress kind of coming on you like layer upon layer. And as the modern male, the modern female, I think our kind of pat answer is, I can deal with this. I've just got to buckle down, take a little bit more, take a big breath, but I can do this. And so you keep going. But I do remember like a year and a half of this build-up of council, police, a little bit of cat and mouse, changing lawyers, trying to get help from a different angle. My husband slowly getting better, but still you've got the residue of those bad business deals. You start feeling like these layers are getting quite heavy. And to be honest, the wrong thing that modern man does is keep forging ahead. Yes. I've got, my daughter was helping me in the shop, but she was trying to regroup her little boy, having divorced. But I should have at that point spoken more openly, asked for a bit of help, said I'm not really coping. But you don't. You just keep thinking, I'll get through this. And I suppose the signals were there when I found myself, the first thing I could say is possibly losing my joy. My joy as I walked into Village Walk and into my shop.
Into your dream?
Yes, into my dream. And not saying, aren't I blessed? Look how beautiful this space is. I found myself not even thinking that. And possibly that's the first sign we all need to be careful of. When we begin to lose our joy. So work became a task, and for 8 years it had not been a task. And so if people came into the shop and said, it's so beautiful, you've got new stock, I love it, I'd just look, and the odd person I'd say, oh really? Like I can't see it anymore. No. So those are signals to actually be careful of. When you lose your joy, when it's not the place that it used to be. Something internally is happening that you don't recognize because you've never been down this road before. So that was my first signal. My second signal was probably checking myself. You know when they say the OCD people, is it the OCD?
Yeah.
Go back and check they've
and
locked
double
the
check
car
and
double check and triple check. Now, I'm not a person who normally does that. And I found myself doing that.
So you're not confident in yourself anymore. Confident in your having done this, your self-assurance, really.
Yes. Like that's what I always do. So why am I checking? When you cashed up at the end of the day, you'd want to cash up again. And then just to be sure, you'd want to cash up again. So I found myself repeating what I had already done and would never normally go back and check.
Yeah.
The third thing, which is really quite a dangerous point, I think, was hiding what I was feeling and how bad I really was, because I wanted everyone to think I could still manage, that they could recuperate, they could be okay, carry on with life. I was taking care of it. And when we try and take care of too much, it doesn't always go well, because too much becomes too much.
Yes.
So I found myself withdrawing, moving away from the shop front, and then going upstairs and pacing. And I would just say, I'm just going to go and count stock or do something. But I wasn't doing any of that. I was pacing, like a caged animal.
Yes.
And so
your internal clock was actually telling you that, no, there's something that has to give.
Yes. And you just think, okay, if I pace, if I respond to where I'm at, I can work through this. I will get through. So I didn't really express any of this to anyone. The only thing was when the rest of the tenants or my friends wanted to do a Christmas party at Village Walk, I was like, what for? So I became negative, whereas I was normally very enthusiastic. So those probably are the signals that friends or family can see. Because the pacing you hide away, the kind of checking yourself, people don't really see you doing that. And the loss of joy, yes, but they might think, oh, of course she's a little bit stressed. But there's really those 4 things that are beginning to happen if people know you well.
So there's no joy, there's no concept of gratitude of life, appreciation of life.
Very much.
So all you're doing is double checking, and you are trying to work, trying to get things done, and you're not feeling that anything is actually getting done.
Yes. And you're trying to hold on to your dream, trying to hold on to what you built. And that becomes almost with every fiber of your being kind of forgetting about everything else. And so the body, in my opinion, sorry, I'm not a doctor to use all the correct terms. Doctors will talk about cortisol levels and things like that. I'm going to tell you in layman's language.
Of course.
You begin to feel yourself almost slipping. So you try and get back, slipping. No, if we can just get the correct licenses, it'll all be okay. And a final letter came in saying we could not get commercial rights for that piece of land, which didn't make sense because I'd seen the zoning right up to Kingsmead West. But I suppose there comes a point in everybody's life where you realize I've fought as hard as I can. It's now done. And in a way, I think I'm probably now looking back, grateful that that letter came. Instead of making myself believe I had to keep pushing, one more push and we'd get there, one more thing and it would be okay, one more. The letter was the line in the sand. And so when that letter came in, my husband looked at me and said, well, let's change it from shops to restaurant. And I said, Graham, I'm done. He said, but we can change. I said, Graham, I'm done. I have fought the fight. I have gone as far as I can. Mm-hmm. It's over. And for me, it was so clear cut, but I'd probably gone too far. So when now I just said, please, let's sell it. Let's let me just get out of here. I don't want to be here anymore. And the sad thing, Gamu, if that's a hard place to reach, because actually I'd pushed myself too far without knowing. And so now what I realized, this line upon line of stress is actually damaging your body. Mm-hmm. And in a way more my mind became very damaged. It became exhausted. My mind was more exhausted than my body. And that's more scary. I'd rather have run a 100K marathon and recovered. But when the mind becomes exhausted, it's a very hard thing to get out of. And so fortunately, my husband at that point could see I was not coping. And then
your regeneration,
yes,
your time of restoration.
Yes.
Where would you say your faith was in this entire in life journey? Because you're talking about being amazing, having gotten a breakthrough, gotten a vision, entered into the vision, possessed your land, really moving up the ladder and having such an impact and making it a beautiful place, not just for workers or for partners, but for the community.
Yes.
And then going through this season of attack and then spiraling. In all of this, how did you, in retrospect, think of your faith?
So, Gamu, to be honest, I didn't think of anything, even myself. So there were two tragic things that happened with my family in that time. Well, one tragic that I didn't attend. My son got married in Vic Falls, and as much as I could go to the coffee shop, I could not attend his wedding because it took me out of my very rigid routine. And only somebody who's gone through that kind of mental breakdown will understand you can do one tiny thing, but you can't do the other.
Yes.
So I missed my son's wedding to a beautiful young girl. I couldn't go. The rest of the family went, but I sat and had coffee. And I knew that to the outward world that wouldn't make sense, would be criticized, but that's where I was. The second thing was my youngest daughter, who'd got married to a wonderful Christian man, lost her first baby. And I could not visit her in the hospital. I could not be there with her. And I could not attend the funeral of their beautiful little girl who died 5-6 hours before the Caesar. And it was just that she wasn't getting enough oxygen. It wasn't that there was anything wrong with her. And so you can imagine the grief of my family. And I was just staring at space. So those were two big things that I could not be involved with. So when you think that those would have been the first things I would have attended or been at, to attend church or my spiritual life, it was on that same level. It was not there. But when my carers said to me, because they were with me every day of the year, even Christmas Day, they were phenomenal. And all they were was with me and making sure I was safe. When they said, do you still believe in God? because I didn't want anybody to read the Bible, pray over me, unless you wanted to, but I wasn't asking. I said, yes, I do, but I can't attend church. I'm not reading anything. I'm just sitting. And so with that question and with those thoughts, I kind of obviously thought of the story of Job. And if we read the story of Job, what does it tell us he did? He sat in the ashes. I don't know if a Bible scholar could tell you. I can't, sorry. I know for 7 days his friends sat with him.
Yeah.
And then when they left and began to criticize and have their little solutions, he was still sitting in the ashes. I'm not sure how long Job himself sat in the ashes.
Yes.
Waiting for what? For God to show up, for circumstances to change, for a new house, a new family, but I don't know what he was waiting for, but he sat in the ashes. And it seems like he didn't want the elders to visit him. He didn't really need his friends' advice. I think he knew enough. He was just like, I'm grieving. So I suppose my time was literally sitting in the ashes.
Yes.
But it was a long time. I don't know if Job did 4 years.
Well, but like you said, it's profound that God allowed him to be written and for us to have the record of him sitting in the ashes, in the ashes of his dreams, in the ashes of his family, his life, his hopes, in the ashes of life itself.
It is, Gamu. So when you think of the story of Job, I just was thinking of one verse where you're like, how did Job hang on to God throughout all that? Similar to me.
Yes.
How do you? And when Job's wife came to him and said, do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die. And Job's answer was very interesting, not what I certainly was maybe thinking at that point, but you didn't have a choice but to sit. He said, you speak of as one of the foolish woman speaks. Shall we indeed accept good from God, and shall we not accept adversity? And I think sometimes we forget that, hey Gamu, where we think everything will be just happy and lovely, and if I pray about that, God's going to
answer me exactly the way I want.
The way I want. And so those are real reality checks. But if these things are happening, God hasn't caused them. It was Satan who did that to Job.
Yes.
But I can say God allowed it, provided Job was not killed.
Yes.
So why would you even allow it? You don't know more of that conversation between God and Satan. But whatever, I must know God is in control and God is with me. And because we live in a sinful and imperfect world, these things are going to happen. And I think sometimes for me, in that kind of business season, was I taking the ways of God seriously enough? And I think any person driving a dream or a vision, I work 7 days a week. But what does God tell me?
Take a break.
Tells me work six and the seventh rest. And in my rest time, I must meditate on Him. I must be still. Modern life does not create stillness. And I think this is partly one of the things why we can get to this very stressful state. Even when you think of holiday, God put 3 fasts for His chosen people, the Israelites. And that was to make them draw aside from their everyday routine, their everyday pressures, their everyday thoughts, and come to him and feast and remember certain things that they'd been blessed with.
Yes.
One, it's stopping your daily routine. Two, it's remembering the blessings that you do have.
Yes, yes.
Do we do that in modern?
Our blessings.
Yes, but drawing aside, stopping.
Yeah.
3 times in the year, God had his people. And so I think as big businessmen or driving wives, mothers, we forget how important that is. And then when we think of holidaying, we think of, like an expensive one. I've got to fly to the Bahamas. I've got to fly to Dubai. Modern life is hard. It wants to tell us to say we must do it all. I think we really got to change that mindset of no. And you actually are empowering other people. You're doing them a service as you empower them, as you help them, as you bring them up through the ranks. We think that now I'm burdening them. Everybody wants a bit more responsibility, wants to understand. I think we've got to learn to share the loads, divide the loads, pinpoint people who you could bring up. And I think a CEO, a business owner has to get rid of that mindset of it's mine, it's my responsibility. Because it's not only that they want the benefits, they feel it's their responsibility to be here every day, to drive this every day. You have a responsibility to rest. You have, because your body needs that. It doesn't, it's not a luxury. It needs it. And it needs you to look after it. It needs you to exercise. It needs you to take time off. Your family needs you to take time off. So I think we're driven by, I've got to forge ahead, and if I don't, my competitors will take the market. Or it's my responsibility, and we've got to get over that. No, let's create the teamwork. Let's divide. Let's train others, and let's realize taking a break, a day off, is not a luxury. It's a necessity. I know we're sitting here at the Christian Counseling Center.
Life encourages us, restores us, just like Moses was also had to be taught that, you know what, delegate, you can't control it all.
Exactly.
Have the rest time, take a time of appreciation.
Moses is a good example.
You know, and I do hope more and more people will listen to voices like yours and not allow themselves to reach a point where they're taking too much and not letting go.
And Gamu, just to finish off here, I thought, once Village Walk was over, I lost my shop. That was it. I was done in business. And God said, no, you're not.
Yes.
And I went back into a small space at Chisy Walk. We called it Living Space. My old partner in the business at Dune Estates joined me, and then we expanded into Arundel. And as Arundel Living Space opened, I had such an overwhelming sense that God had given me a double portion now.
Wow.
Just like Job had everything restored. And I just didn't think that was possible, but God had his way, and it was very small beginnings. I didn't strive for it. I didn't fight for it. It was actually presented to me.
Wow.
So I would just like to encourage anyone who has a glitch, who loses, trust God, ask God,